My name is Richard Furrow, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired. Because of Go Cloud Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the Glow Cloud team.
Welcome, everyone. I am Mike Gibbs, and I am here to help you build your technology career. Maybe your goal is to become a cloud architect, or your goal is to become a security architect, or an enterprise architect, or an AI architect. I am here to assist you. I've been in technology now for about 25 years. It's been 25 years since I got my first architect job. I've loved every minute in it, and I've spent more than 2 decades helping people just like you get your first tech job, get promoted in tech, negotiate that big raise. And I've now have graduates that I've trained at Apple, at Amazon, at Cisco, at Google, at IBM, at Microsoft, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, JP Morgan Chase Bank, NatWet, and many, many, many other prestigious organizations like Zscaler and NetSpoke and Palo Alto Networks. And that's why I'm here once a week, is to answer your questions. I remember when I began my tech career, it was about 25 years ago. I decided I was going to leave internal medicine and go to tech. And I did what everybody did, called my local computer school, got a whole bunch of certifications. And guess what? There was not a single person in the world that had any desire to hire me based upon the certifications. And then I found some tech career experts, and I asked them what it was that I needed to learn to go and get hired. A couple months later, I got my first job. I was a senior engineer. I was then a lead architect within 3 months. Within 2 years, I was a principal architect. And that was the beginning of my career. And I loved every minute of it. So I'm here so you don't have to make mistakes. So you don't have to just learn by making mistakes. I've already seen all the mistakes others have made. I've coached them out of making these mistakes for 20 years, and the shortest distance to the top is to go straight. So bring us your questions so I can help you. Now, before we actually answer your questions, I want to talk about three things that I'm excited about. The first one is that we are holding a completely free certified information security manager bootcamp at the end of the month. Tyrone from my team will drop that in the chat box. This should be in the description of the video as well. It's going to be a nice, 1 to 2 week free boot camp. We're going to cover the information and the certified information security manager. It's in my top 3 favorite security certifications, which include the CISSP, the CCSP, and the CISM. And this one really does a good job of focusing on some of the more business-oriented sides of security, the perspective of it from the CISO, the perspective of it from the security architect that needs to communicate to the CISO. So really like this certification, and it's free. There are 4.8 million people. There is a shortage of cybersecurity people right now. The World Economic Forum is actually trying to figure out how to keep the global economy stable because the cybersecurity shortage is so bad. And there are hundreds of thousands of open vacant positions in the US for good cybersecurity positions, because there's a lot of certified people, but there's almost nobody that knows security. So lots of great, exciting things in security. And this is one of those good professional certifications, and we're going to teach it completely free, completely live, where we'll answer your questions. So sign up. My team will pop that in the chat box. I also want to tell you that tomorrow, it'll be a little later than the usual time. We're going to have a how to become an architect or how to get that first cloud architect job the answers and questions. It'll be a live webinar on Zoom. We'll go over the cloud architect role. We'll talk about what we actually do as cloud architect versus what people think we do, because that's the difference between having the right skills versus getting the wrong skills. We'll cover every skill you need in this. We'll cover how we architects do our job, what we do in the job, and of course, we'll leave about an hour and a half to answer any career questions you have live on Zoom. So if you've been on 4 or 5 interviews and you didn't get hired and you want us to see if you're ready to go on your next interview, we'll do that. You want us to look at something on your LinkedIn profile to say you're not getting architect interviews, what should you do? We'll do it. So we'll talk about the role. I want to make sure you all understand and get every skill that you need on the list. And then after that, any questions you want, we will happily answer them. So welcome, and we'll answer your questions. Now, one last free thing. Tyrone is going to drop a link to the how to become an architect, how to become a cloud architect in the chat box. And it's going to include all the things that you need to do. It'll have similar content to the webinar, and maybe you want to read that before the webinar. And then after that webinar, we're going to get deeper and deeper and deeper. So go also get that. It's completely free, and it's completely free for your career. Now, ask your questions. I can be here for the next hour and a half or so answering questions. I love answering questions because I'd rather spend some time with you than see you spend 6 months and go down the wrong pathway. I know how hard it was starting my career. So, Tyrone, you're behind the scenes. I think I've seen some questions pop in. So bring some up. Dingleman. Hi, Mike. You've gotten a flood of emails this week regarding security architecture roles. I would assume you would. What is a pre-sale security architect as opposed to just a security architect? So, Dingleman, when it comes to architects, we could either work on one side of the coin. And yes, expect a whole lot of security architect people reaching out to you. So if we work pre-sales, realistically speaking, we're working for a vendor. So we might be working for Cisco systems. We might be working for Palo Alto networks. We might be working for, say, a Fortinet. We could be working for, say, a Checkpoint. We could be part of a big integrator like IBM who brings in total solutions. We could be working at an Accenture, a Deloitte, or whatever, where we're going to design, present, and sell a security architecture. Now, that means we are a consultant to the client. So when I worked at Cisco, I would design, present, and sell an architecture to the client. That was my role. It was a pre-sales architect. Now, the opposite side of the pre-sales architect is the security architect that actually works for the customer themselves. And the job is going to be almost the same, whether you work for a vendor like a Palo Alto, a Fortinet, a Cisco, a Checkpoint, a Microsoft, and they're big security vendors there. Or if you work for an end customer like a bank. So let's pretend now you work for a bank. So now when you work for the bank and you're the security architect, you're responsible for that bank's security, designing systems for that bank's security. So what does that mean you will do? It means that you will learn the organization's needs. You will determine from the C-suite, you will find out whatever's critical business processes. You will learn the vision of that organization. You will learn the goals of that organization. You will understand the business's challenge. The leadership of that organization will give you information about their risk tolerance. You'll be asking the leadership about that organization, about the assets they have and the things that they need to protect. And then you'll be leading a team in many cases to look at the entire organization's entire security environment, whether that be their application security, their endpoint security, their network security, their data security, for example, whatever IAM strategies they have, whatever security frameworks. And in this particular case, you'll be working for the end customer. You'll be designing that solution to the end customer, and then you'll have to convince the CISO and the CEO and the CFO to actually invest in your architecture. So no matter where you're at in architecture, it's going to be a sales role. So the question is, do you work for, say, a Cisco, where you go to your client and you ask the client about their business goals, their business pain points, their business strategies, and you design that solution and sell it to the client? Or do you work for the client and then you work with the Ciscos, the Palo Altos, the Fortinets, and the Checkpoint to design your security architecture for that business? And again, at the end of the day, you're still going to have to sell it to management, because management doesn't wake up and say, how much money can I spend, Mike? I wish they did. It would be fun. Imagine the kind of cool technology projects we could build. But no, the reality is we're solving a business problem with security. So it's much the same job. Now, I will tell you, I've worked as a security architect and a network architect for an end customer. And I can tell you that is a good job. But when you work at the same company and those types of roles, for the most part, you're doing very similar things day in and day out and day in. You work on one architecture with the same people. And then as soon as that architecture is done, guess what? You do a new architecture, typically with the same people. And as soon as that architecture has been designed, you work on a new project. Nothing wrong with that. A lot of people love that. I've done it. Very stable career. Now, I personally like working on the vendor side where you're tied towards sales. And I'll tell you why I like that. Well, today I could be working with, let's say, this global bank A. Tomorrow, I could be working with global bank B that has a completely different business. And by working with global bank A and global bank B, I may get to work with different technologies, various solutions, various businesses, various business architectures, various technology architectures. And that way, I don't get bored. So, I like being a consultant. I like coming in. I like talking to people, meeting people, developing new relationships, and going and doing the next one. Because that's me. I just like it. But I've worked for the end customer as a security architect, and I worked in the vendor space as a security architect. Now, you'll have options for both. Both are good jobs. Both pay between $200,000 and $300,000 a year for people with medium skills as an architect. If you're much more skilled as an architect, obviously you can earn much more than that. But they're all good jobs, regardless of work at the endpoint versus the client. But when you work as an architect for a vendor, when that vendor typically does well, especially if you're on the sales side or the pre-sale side, you get to participate in a bonus/commission structure. They don't call it quite commission, but the more you sell, the more you earn in various bonuses and spiffs and other things. And I always like that control working pre-sales too. If I choose to work harder and I'm able to bring in more money because I've honed my sales skills, you can earn a lot more. But both options are great. And Dingo, if you've got more questions about, pre-sales versus post-sales, ask it. Love to help. Cloud Doctor. Hi, Mike and team. What resources, books, courses, and blogs would you recommend for learning cloud architecture? Great question, Cloud Doctor. So let's talk a little bit about what we're actually doing and some of the kind of things that we're actually going to do as the architect. And then I want to make it clear what when you understand what we're doing, then at least at this types of things, you'll understand why I talk about the skills and the kinds of books. So understand that an architect, a cloud architect, Cloud Doctor, is not a hands-on technology professional. We don't touch the technology. We don't code. We don't configure. We don't do DevOps. We don't do SysOps. We don't touch Linux. That is not our job. And this is why most people want to be a cloud architect, and they spend all this time. They learn to code. They learn Terraform. They learn DevOps. They learn Kubernetes. They get all these involved and do hundreds of cloud projects, and then 5 years later, no one will hire them. So let's talk about the things we do. Now, we will definitely, as architects, be developing and maintaining architecture frameworks. We will be creating technology roadmaps and aligning those technology roadmaps with an organization's business objectives. We are going to be leading a team of people that will analyze the IT systems and the IT infrastructure. We will be looking for areas of improvement in IT processes and systems processes for our clients to make their business better. We're going to be designing things like future state architecture models, like in the future, the company is going to look like this. The business is going to operate this way. This is what the technology is going to look for. We'll be constantly evaluating new technologies. So we've got a business. They do customer service. Do we enhance the customer service? Do we add, say, a new CRM system in? Do we add some agentic AI? So we're always looking for ways where we can look at whatever new technologies we can use to improve the business that we have. Now, we will be doing things like developing IT governance policies and procedures, leading and facilitating meetings, collaborating and managing stakeholders to understand business needs, aligning IT initiatives with the overall business strategy. We're going to be doing a lot of gap analysis between the current architecture and the future target or to-be architecture, whatever you want to call it. We'll be overseeing system integration efforts, potentially with upwards of 1,000 vendors. We're going to be developing and enforcing architecture standards and best practices, for example, in every extranet environment where you're going to connect to an extranet partner. Your demilitarized zone should look like this. We will be assessing and mitigating IT-related risks. We will be leading architecture review boards. We'll be facilitating communication between various business units in a business. We'll be designing scalable and flexible technology solutions. We'll be evaluating various vendors and technology platforms. We'll be building business continuity and disaster recovery planning. We'll be participating in strategic planning sessions. So if you heard what I said, what we actually do, note they're very business. Now, that doesn't mean we cloud architects don't need to be technical. We have to understand the technology, what that technology is, how that technology works, and how those various technology components were to fit together. So what would our demilitarized zone look like? So what might we need to load share across a firewall? Can we use one set of firewalls or two sets of next generation firewalls? Should we use an IDS IPS system? If so, even though that's integrated into the next generation firewalls, what would we achieve? Okay, different logging, different attacks. Okay, great. Now, what are we going to do with all these logs? How are we going to actually put them in and correlate the logs? Maybe we need a SIEM system. So when we're looking at architecture, we're looking at all the pieces and components of the pie, the network, the compute, the storage. So we need to understand how the technologies work, but we don't touch it. So we need to understand the how and the why of the technologies, not the how to. And that's the other place where people go wrong, is they learn how to configure things, how to code. Great, I learned Python, for example. But that means meaningless when it comes to the architect role. So let me give you the example of why I show you can't learn architecture by doing stuff. I bet you everybody here has used their PC before. Now, let's say we needed to use a server for a various application. We would need to think about the CPU or the CPUs that are in that server. We would need to think about the CPUs, the per core performance. We would need to think about the level 1, level 2 cache, level 3 cache on that CPU and how it would impact performance. We would need to think about the speed of the DRAM that's feeding things into the CPU. We might need to be concerned about the number of PCI lanes on that CPU and how many GPUs it could therefore accommodate for, say, GPU computing. We might be looking at the storage buses necessary to actually get storage at the rate of speed. Do we use the NVMe ports? Do we use the SATA ports? Do we use SAS ports? But see, you can work on your computer all day and know none of that. So when we teach architecture, we're talking about how the technology works and what's going on, because that's what's needed in system design. You can build stuff all day long and you're never going to learn it. That's why the construction crews that build the hotel don't get asked to design a hotel. The architect goes to college and learns design. The engineer learns on the job how to build. So now that you understand that, what kind of books do you need? You will need collegiate level MBA textbooks if you're not with us, because we train this, and that you would get out of an MBA program, which means knowledge of finance, because you can't build a business case without finance. It means knowledge of marketing, because you're going to have to create the cultural change of cloud adoption, and that means that's going to be developing marketing plans going through an organization. It means accounting, because you're going to have to be able to look at an organization's balance sheets and financial statements and determine where the strengths and weaknesses of these organizations are. It means learning how to do consulting, maybe studying the McKinsey method, for example, how to create these mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive type hypotheses. It involves really getting some good knowledge in business, learning how to give a good presentation, learning how to write to an executive, and learning how to lead. So for me, Cloud Doctor, how did I get these skills? I'm going to tell you right now. I did 3/4 of an MBA at when I was younger at Drexel University. Maybe it was only half of the MBA. And I did a full MBA at Widener University. This is where I learned these business skills. I also took about $100,000 of training on executive presence, CXO relevancy, sales skills, leadership skills, exercising influence. And thankfully, my employers were really good about paying for that. So we teach all of these in any of our cloud architect programs, enterprise architect programs, because they're expensive to learn. So these are some things you would do. Now, courses, If you're not with us, make sure you get some presentation skills classes, some executive presence class, how to be seen as the lead or executive, some gravitas. You're going to need that in the role. Some CXO relevancy training on how to actually communicate to the CEO. Obviously, we teach all this because we're the only people that actually train architects out there. But keep that in the back of your mind. You're going to need that. Now, blogs. I wouldn't waste my time if I was you reading blogs. And here's the thing. When it comes to getting information, you don't want to get it from Fred's Aunt Martha. Now, if it's a blog from David Lithicum, read it. If it's a blog from a distinguished architect like Russ Wright, read it. If it's a John Chambers blog, yeah, go read that. But we architects have to maintain what you call information hygiene. We can't be looking at the 22-year-old that never had the tech job in their life that's going to teach you something about something they don't know about. Now, granted, I also know people at 22 that are such geniuses they could get any job. But the point is we need to hear from experts. So generally speaking, I want you to read from vendors. Go to the vendors documentation. Read CIO magazine. Read what the leadership is reading and keep yourself away. I also would read The Economist. I would read Business Week magazine as well if I was you. And I'd probably read some kind of a financial paper like the Wall Street Journal. Because as architects, we have to constantly strategically advise our clients. So even if you just catch 15 minutes of CNBC in the morning, that's still going to be beneficial. But I don't want you going to blogs that are created by people that don't know what they don't even know yet. And sadly, that's the majority of it that you'll see. You'll see someone that's not made it and they're creating content. So there is that. Now, where do you learn the information? You have to learn how the technology works. So what kind of knowledge are we talking about? We're talking about networking skills. So it's the understanding of how an organization would build its IP addressing plan and lay out its addressing plan and where it gets subnetted, where it gets supernetted, where the routes get aggregated. It's determining the wide area network you would use to connect to the cloud and what it should look like, and choosing the right type of performance, like an IPsec tunnel versus a software-defined WAN versus a SASE WAN versus a private line. And it's things like, how you would use NAT. So these are networking things. The good news, we teach them all, but if you're not with us, the Cisco Networking Academy does a pretty good job of teaching networking. But I'll tell you, 99% of what else I've seen there is all garbage. But the Cisco Networking Academy does a very good job of teaching networking. The Cisco Press books are also good. And if somebody wants to learn networking, they want to read Routing TCP/IP, volumes 1 and 2 from Jeff Doyle, Internet Routing Architectures from Bassam Halabi, and then the Stevens TCP/IP books, volumes 1 and 2. That person's going to pretty much get the networking they need right then and there out of those books. And I have no problem doing it. Now, those books that I've talked about are about 5,000 pages, but that will give you the networking. Or you could take a course like ours, which we know how to tell you exactly what you need and what you don't need and do it. But it's not just networking. If we really look at what the cloud is, it's a data center. It's a data center. So what does that mean? It means you need to understand the data center technology. Like what? Like servers and server virtualization. Now, we teach that. But if you weren't with us, you're going to have to learn server virtualization. And where might you learn a lot about that? You might learn a lot about that from VMware. You might be able to learn some about it from KVM and QEMU. And then you really need to understand these hypervisors and the way they work. Same thing with containers and container orchestration. Same thing. We've had lots of container orchestration mechanisms, but IBM OpenShift, probably what most businesses are using for their Kubernetes environment, because they can use it in all three clouds and their data centers. So, you're dealing with IBM OpenShift. So learn about Kubernetes and learn about the Kubernetes orchestration platform. Learn about the Kubernetes control plane and the data plane. Again, you don't have to build it, but you need to know how it works. Same thing with storage area networks. Now, obviously, we train these things, but where can you learn a lot about storage area networks? Well, IBM for one place. And who is that big company in storage? Well, we've got Dell EMC. EMC is a massive storage company. And if you were not with us, by reading documentation and design guides from, say, Dell EMC, and you learned about block storage and object storage and file storage, and then again from IBM. And you know what? There's other good storage providers like Nimble Storage and other people that actually make good storage. And you can read a little bit about their storage architectures too, and how that technology works. And then you'll understand storage. Same thing for databases. We have relational databases. We have NoSQL databases. How do you make your databases scale? Again, we're going off of the cloud stuff, but we're learning the actual technology. Why? because 98% of companies are multi-cloud, which means if you only know one cloud, there's no jobs for you ever. So you have to understand all the clouds, and by learning the technology, you'll get it. Same thing for load balancers. You can learn a lot about load balancers from the load balancer experts, F5. They've been like load balancers for decades. They've got lots of documentation on when to use network load balancers, how network load balancers work, how application load balancers work, how reverse proxies work, and you can start thinking about when and where to use them. So I recommend taking a course like ours, because for the average person, they won't know what they won't know. And they're going to end up learning the wrong skills, and 2 or 3 years later, they're not going to get hired because they don't know the right skills. But there's a reason I make these books, and I put these books out there, and I run this webinar. And that way, if people can either train with us, or they will get 100% of a skills list of everything they need to know. So they can choose to train with us. They can choose to buy the training on their own. Now, it'll probably cost 20 or 30 times more if the person trains on their own. But whether they want to train on their own or they want to train with us, I just want to get that person hired. I want them to get in that job. So there's that. So why don't you download that free guide, or click to get that free guide on what you need to become an architect, Cloud Doctor. And then after that, join me on the free webinar tomorrow, and we'll go over the role, and maybe come off mute face to face. We can have a conversation, a real person to person conversation, because that's the way we can easiest help you. Dingelman, you sit for your CISSP next month. With the CISM would be a good compliment. So Dingelman, and I know you, so you're really smart. So if I had a properly trained architect, I would either do 1 certification or I would do 3. And in today's world, I'd probably do 3. I'd probably do the CISSP, because, it's not my choice. That's kind of the king and the queen of all the security architect certifications, because it's business focused. It covers the full spectrum of everything. And that certification is adored by CISOs. It's adored by security leadership. Most of the engineers hate it because there's no hands-on in this certification at all, because it's a strategy certification, which is why there's no hands-on. There's no hands-on in strategy. So there's that. Now, the CCSP, Dingelman, you have access to that training free. And if I was you, I would do that. That would show you the cloud security specifics of and I would probably do the CISM. They're my big 3 for security. CISM focuses on management. CISSP focuses on pretty much the entire spectrum, especially from the policy perspective. And the CCSP gives you that cloud perspective. And Dingelman, with your knowledge, because you could take the architect role, I've already trained you for some of the business skills and the leadership skills and the sales skills and executive skills. And you also have the design skills. So with that, you're basically 70% there. And you take these 3 certifications, and that's the other 30%. And I think you're probably going to be in pretty good shape. So Dingelman, I'd probably do the CISM with you. I think you'll find it very easy. I think you're going to find it really easy, actually. But I always like the way they enforce the thinking, because it always goes back to me and the architect perspective. What's in it for the business? What's in it for the business? What's in it for the business? And I also so the other thing is, Dingelman, and I know you work for which vendor you work for, and it's a good vendor. People are tired of having this vendor proprietary nonsense that talks about them about a bunch of proprietary things that cause a lot of technical debt, and they cause a lot of vendor lock-in. And the worst thing we can have in an architect of any kind is someone that's biased to love something. They need to be biased at making their customer successful, not loving a particular technology or platform. And being vendor neutral, the CISM is a pretty good one, because it does not induce bias, which is the worst thing you can do for an architect, is induce bias. Imagine a doctor that had a love affair with Pfizer and just wanted to give Pfizer drugs for every single patient. Pfizer makes some great drugs, but these medications should be used for the right conditions, not just given to anybody because a physician loves Pfizer. So the way we can't have a physician that loves any particular vendor, we can't have an architect. I'm in love with Amazon, or I'm in love with Google, or I'm in love with Microsoft. They're all great vendors. They produce incredible technologies, but our focus can't be on the vendor success. Our focus needs to be on our client success. And that's what's good about the CISSP, the CCSP, and the CISM. It induces no vendor bias. And you give me someone with 13 AWS certifications, I've got someone that's biased because of the training towards AWS. Can't hire them. Don't want them in my business. Now, if they had all the AWS, all the Azure, all the Google certifications, now that's probably going to remove the bias because now they have all the equivalent. But anytime somebody has way too many certifications from a single vendor, I can't hire them on my team because they're usually biased to love a vendor versus love my client success. I hope that makes sense. Ask some questions. If you've got some questions, bring them in. We want to do anything we can to help you. Jose. So, Jose, I actually know what your LinkedIn profile looks like and your resume. So, Jose, your resume right now looks very engineering to me. You got a whole bunch of buzzwords. You got these long sentences strung together with 101 buzzwords. What's missing from your resume, Jose, is any of the actual business. So if you designed a new wide area network, which I know you did, lots of wide area networks, what did that wide area network do? Did that wide area network that you created enable that business to now perform business in 3 countries, in 5 different countries? And if so, what did that equate to the organization's total revenue? Our enterprise architect thing. Anytime that you did some stakeholder management. So if you're dealing with a large network, let's say you're working across a large organization as a network architect, and let's say I'm dealing with a company like a GE. Oh, that's like the only kind of company I've ever worked on, big companies like this. So when you work and if you're very strategic in your career, that's what will happen. When you work on a company like GE, there's the airplane engine division, and then there was the medical division, and then there was the train engine division, and then there was the appliance division. So each one of these businesses still fell under GE, right? And that's why it's an enterprise, big business doing lots of different things. Now, things that you would have done there is you would have done some stakeholder management skills to reduce. You may have had a lot of stakeholder meetings to get stakeholder buy-in and support for new projects. Could be something you could talk about it. You could talk about managing 800 vendors across the enterprise in order to create a cohesive technology strategy. Again, enterprise architect kind of thing. You may have led an architecture design team of 50 people to design a migration to XYZ cloud, for example. You may have done a cloud repatriation project, meaning you took stuff off of the public cloud and created an OpenStack cloud, for example, or a Nutanix cloud and enhanced your performance by 11% while cutting your cost by 37%. Again, that would be something that you would talk about. So it's all for you, Jose, about getting out of this techie stuff and showing what the tech does for the business. So there's really 3 levels of technology careers. And I can't tell you that one level is higher or better. There's just 3 types. At one level, we have the admin/technician level. And that's the people that just configure stuff all day long. They don't necessarily know what they're configuring or why they're configuring. They're just the people that click a bunch of boxes. You give them some tasks to do, and they do them. We need them. They get stuff done. At that next level, we start getting into that engineering. And that engineering is all about the tech. It's making the tech work. It's determining where your tech problems are. It's performance tuning the tech. It's optimizing the tech. This is where you put your hat on with the 2 propellers and you get really smart and you bring your super smart engineers. That's engineering. No. These people need to understand the tech, how the tech works, how it integrates, the strengths and weaknesses. These are your rock stars. And then you have your executives/planners. This is your management. This is your architect. And at this level, what you're doing is you're really aligning the organization's people, helping to redefine the way the organization does things or the organization's processes. And then you're bringing in better technology to make it better. So if I have an airline that's having trouble optimizing their fuel cost, I might use AI to create some form of a recommendation engine to help that airline determine when is the best time to fly their fuel option contracts. And that could mine through statistical data and news data, for example. So your job is not the AI system. The AI system is nothing. It's that you're creating the AI system for better fuel purchasing things. Likewise, if you were working for a global retailer and you're now a cloud architect or an enterprise architect, and that global retailer says, we want to take more businesses to the web, but one of the things that happens when people come into our store is they come in for a suit. And when they come in for a suit, we have someone that matches them with shoes and belts and shirts. So they come in for $1,000 suit and they leave $3,000 later. And we want to create that same effect on the web. Well, then maybe that organization wants some form of an AI recommendation engine integrated into an e-commerce website, which would change the way that people actually buy things. So then we would need to figure out, what do we want that AI recommendation to do? How are we going to train that AI recommendation engine? And how can that AI recommendation engine create a better customer experience so the person spends more time on the website and then spends more in the store? Again, that's there. So the impact wouldn't be created an AI recommendation engine. That's engineering. The architecture is created an AI recommendation engine for a global retailer, which increased revenue by 4.76%. What was that impact on sales? So that's how you tailor your resume for architecture. You put what you do it in an architecture context as opposed to an engineering concept. So that's what I want you to think about. What certification should you pursue to support your goal of becoming a chief architect? So there's Jose now and in the future. By the time you're a chief architect, you're going to have to take every single certification off of your resume. What did I just say? I said by the time you're a chief architect, you will have to take every certification off of your resume. So, have you ever seen a CEO put on their business card a tech certification? No. The chief information officer will not put their CCIE number on their business card. Now, at the same time, you're not going to find an executive vice president of a business putting it there either. So as you move up into these roles that pay, say, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $800,000, they're not about certifications at all. They're all about impact. Now, Jose, we have you as a network engineer, and we've got a goal of getting you as a chief architect in the future. Now, transition you out of engineering into architecture, I would probably do a TOGAF 10 certification that we want now. This TOGAF 10 is going to give you some form of an enterprise architecture framework series. We're already training you for enterprise architecture and chief architecture, so you're going to be fine with those skills because we're going to train you those skills. Now, if I wanted to be on the cloud, I'd probably get one cloud certification. I will tell you, none of the cloud architect certifications have anything to do with architecture. The AWS Solutions Architect Professional is a systems administration certification, not an architect. The Google Professional Cloud Architect is more systems administration. And the Azure Solutions Architect Expert is more systems administration. I'll tell you, if I look at all three and I look at the way they write the questions, I'd say the closest would be the Azure Solutions Architect Expert. It's a little more relevant to an architect. And by relevant, if I gave the AWS Solutions Architect a 5% value to the architect, 5% out of 100%, I might give the Azure Solutions Architect Expert a 9 or a 10%. But still, 90% bad, 10% good versus the AWS one for the architect, 95% bad, 5% good. But I'd still tell you got to get one of those cloud architect professional certifications, even though it has nothing to do with architecture. And why is this, Jose? Because you've been in networking for a long time. And now we want to get you one of these cloud professional certifications to kind of show the world that, like, look, you've done something else. Now you know the cloud, and now you've got that with the TOGAF. So those two are probably good. Now, if your goal was a little more, I'd almost, and it's going to sound ridiculous, I'd almost consider the CISSP. And I know, Jose, you have training for that because I provided it to you. That's not going to help you with the AI goal at all. But given security in the state of security that's so bad right now, given the extreme lack of people that know anything about security and how bad it is, I can tell you, when I put the CISSP on somebody's business's card or their LinkedIn profile or their resume along with the right stuff, that is like a vacuum. Like recruiters and everybody starts literally coming to the person. When can I interview you? When can I interview? When can I interview? So Again, if you just took the TOGAF 10, the CISSP, and the Solutions Architect Professional, you wouldn't have the skills because they're just certifications. But those certifications will get you interviews like you can't even imagine. And then, Jose, the skills that you're learning from us that we're training for you, and it's always good to see you, those are going to be the ones that get you hired. But I'd probably do those three. But that'll get you your first architect job. Maybe it's a cloud architect. Maybe it's an enterprise architect. You can do fine with that. But now, 10 years from now, or 5 years from now, or 8 years from now, you want an $800,000 chief architect job. Now we're talking a whole new world. Now, when you go from that $250,000 architect job to a $500,000 architect job, now it's much more about your business acumen. Now it's much more about your polish. Now it's knowing which fork to use when you take your billionaire clients to the restaurant. I am not joking. Now it's knowing how to build customer relationships. Now it's knowing how to lead 1,500-person teams. Now it's learning how to bring out the best in others. You're trading your IQ now for your EQ. Now, when you reach that level of a chief architect, it's going to be executive briefings all day. It's going to be presentations. It's going to be lots of dinners, lots of drinks. And people don't understand the impact of how much that could be. So how much time you spend with clients in one of these chief architect roles. To put it in an example, in 1 year, I spent $100,000 on lunches and dinners. Company obviously paid for it, and drinks. That was the amount of face time that I had taking people out and entertaining clients in the chief architect role. So that's what you're at. So if there was a certification that's going to help you become a chief architect, it would be the MBA or the Master's in Business. And when I have architects, obviously you're in our elite program, which includes basically the skills that you need from an MBA without all the extra fluff, as well as the stuff that's missing from the MBA. You should be good. But Jose, if I really wanted to make my paper pretty, I would add an MBA. I would use the CISSP. I would use the TOGAF 10 and the AWS Solutions Architect Professional or the Azure Solutions Architect Expert as my stepping stone certs. And then when you reach the top, you're going to have to take them off. And Jose, even when I was at Cisco, I was asked to remove the Cisco Certified Internet Expert and the CISSP from my business cards. And when I was there, I actually left a architect role, took a sales engineering role at Cisco for a period of time. And there it was like, oh, Mike, I need all your certs. I love it. And then when I moved into one of these executive, chief architect roles for a vertical, a whole vertical at Cisco, which was a huge business. And when I took that role, my manager said, Mike, can we talk about this alphabet soup on your business cards? And I'm like, yeah, what do you mean? And they said, can we get rid of the CCIE? I'm like, rid of the CCIE? I killed myself. And rid of the CISSP. And I didn't work that hard for that one, but okay. So, and I said to my manager, why? And they said, do you want to be seen as that techie sales engineer, or do you want to be seen as the senior executive that's a peer to these executives that could help guide these executives in their multi-billion-dollar businesses? I said, that's what I want. I want to be seen as an executive. So, Jose, at different parts of your career, we're going to use different things. So in the short term, that's what I want you to get. In the long term, we'll be removing them, and we'll be maybe thinking about an MBA. If you've got questions, please ask them. We do want to help, but we can't help if you don't ask questions. What strategies can help in explaining a career transition to the hiring manager or during the interviews? Good questions. So the key when you go on these interviews is two things. One is to show them that you are so good that whatever your experience or lack thereof is enough competency for them to hire you. The other thing is to show them that you are what they're looking for. Now, those are the two biggest things. I can do the job and you want me. So let's start with those two things. So if I have an architect, I want to hire an architect. That doesn't mean I want to hire an engineer. Doesn't mean I want to hire an airplane pilot. It doesn't mean I want to hire a physician, an attorney. If I need an architect, I need an architect. So that's the first thing, and I'll determine that by asking you questions. The second thing is you have those other attributes that I want to hire you. And then we'll talk about the career transition piece. The attributes that I want are, can I trust you? Most people can't make it through the interview without being caught in a lie. Can't hire someone that he didn't like or that lied to me. The next thing that I care about as a manager is, do you know your limitations? So Most people that I meet don't know what they don't even know. Because they don't know their strengths, they don't know their weaknesses, they don't know any of it. So you need to know what you know and know what you don't know so you don't make mistakes. And you need to make it very clear to that hiring manager. The next thing that you need to show that hiring manager some energy, enthusiasm, and passion for the work. So make that clear to the hiring manager. You're going to be more likely to get hired. What else? Because you got to do this. So they also want to know that you're emotionally intelligent. So show your emotional intelligence and how you respond to questions on the interview. They want to know that you're a good team player, and then they want to know that you go above and beyond. So you communicate just those things and prove competency. For the most part, you're going to get hired. But now let's talk about that career transition. So you're going to have these answers planned. Why did you leave this for this? What's the reason you left your last career? And you can't say anything negative about your employer. People ask me, Mike, why did you leave internal medicine? And I said, it's kind of a funny story. I do like taking care of people. But when it comes to practicing medicine, I wish I could actually practice more medicine as opposed to spending all day fighting with insurance companies, begging them and pleading with them to get the patient's medical care needed for people that already paid for the insurance. And I said, well, that was a decent career and a good career. What I loved was technology, and I loved how technology could connect people and how we could use technology to share information, potentially creating better medical care, creating an environment where people could collaborate all over the world. And that's why I'm here. I can make a bigger impact, I said, than in my medical role. And that really suited the hiring manager. Now, Cloud Doctor, the hiring manager said, Mike, it gets really stressful here. This is one of the pressure cooker environments where people are on constant outages and people have hot tempers. Are you going to be okay under pressure? So, Cloud Doctor, what did I do? I went back through my memories. I went back through my old job, and I then told them, I showed them examples from my past and how it mattered. And I said, Dave, let's talk about this. I understand pressure cooker environments. Did you know that I was a paramedic for 7 years? When people would dial 911 at the worst moments in their life, they would call 911 and I would show up. I said, and I developed a tremendous amount of experience staying calm under pressure and solving emergencies. And then I said, Dave, you know what happened when I went past that? I then worked as an ER nurse when I was in the ER. And then after that, I became a nurse practitioner practicing internal medicine. I also did my stint in the ER, constantly managing emergencies. So when the rest of the world is getting stressed, I'm just getting relaxed because that's my used to. I'm used to working in an emergency setting. And then Dave said another thing, Mike, in our role as an architect, we have to ask a lot of questions. You don't have a lot of technology background. So convince me that you have the background and experience to ask the right questions. And I said, Dave, it's interesting you say this. Did you know that I come from medicine? And did you know in medicine, to get the right diagnosis, it's 80% about the information you collect and only about 20% of what you see. So I've had to learn how to ask the right questions, the painful questions, the embarrassing questions, and be able to ask these questions in a manner that not only gets the information, promotes truth and honesty in the information, but makes the person comfortable sharing the information with me. Because I have a lot of experience getting to the right information. In fact, Dave, did I tell you that I had a specialty practice where I would actually take the patients that nobody could figure out and they would send them to me and I would spend the time and ask the right questions and get to the great solutions. And I said, and I'm sure I will do the same thing for you. I will ask the right questions, use all that hard-earned therapeutic and empathetic communications I learned from healthcare to ask the right questions. Now, Cloud Doctor, what am I doing? I'm showing the hiring manager that the new job is the same as the old job. Now, it's really funny, Cloud Doctor, and if I wouldn't, I accidentally took about 3 or 4 months as an engineer. And then when I had that job, and then immediately I went to Wall Street. Actually, it was Knight Capital Group. It was technically in Jersey City. It was the largest market maker on the NASDAQ. I think we did about 2 billion trades a day. I'm pretty sure it was about 2 billion trades a day going through a system of 500 employees. This was like the biggest money-making machine you could possibly imagine. Fastest trading systems in the world. It was really cool to kind of work on these kinds of systems. But one of the things that they mentioned to me, they're like, look, Mike, you got an odd resume. You got all this medical stuff here. You got this engineering stuff here, but I need an architect, someone that can get the right kind of information. And I said, well, it's really funny. I said, most of my life is really spent learning architecture, not engineering. I only had this 3-month stint in engineering just because it's where I started. And the person said to me, what do you mean you've been working in architecture? And I said, well, here's the world I've been living in. Someone has come to me and they've got a challenge. It's typically called the chief complaint. It's a challenge. It's a goal. For example, let's say someone comes into me and they have a sore throat. And I said, so what am I really doing here in this role? I have to examine that person. I've got to ask the right number of questions to figure out what the problem is. I have to make a diagnosis or assessment, and I have to build that patient a plan. Now, what do I do as an architect? What am I going to be doing here as an architect, Dave? I'm going to be asking the end users and the clients and the business executives, what is the problem they're trying to solve, right? And he says, yes. I said, so Dave, my next step actually is going to be here is not only know what problem I need to solve, I need to ask the right questions, right? Like I have been doing for the last 10 years and I went to school for to get the right information. And they said, well, yeah, exactly. I said, I need to come up with a diagnosis and identify the exact problem I'm trying to solve, right? And they said, yes. And then I said, I need to come up with a plan called an architecture. So for the last 7 years of school, I learned how to address a problem, ask the right questions, make a diagnosis, and build the plan. Isn't that my job here? Like I didn't look at it that way. So when you start thinking about it that way, what you're trying to do is you're trying to take your past experience, your past life experience, and you're trying to show the hiring manager that it's the same thing. So these are going to be some kind of strategies you're realistically looking for to go out there and show that, yes, I know the job. I didn't exactly do this, but I did this, and it's the same thing. Great question there, Cloud Doctor. Please, if you've got questions, ask them. Otherwise, it's going to be an early day for me, and I'm going to go back to my desk, which is great because I've got lots of work. But I'd love to answer questions and help if I can. Alan, you have a question about the data architect career. I don't know which plan to follow. Infrastructure-oriented skills and then something more data-oriented or the other end. So, Alan, I'm going to tell you two things. One is I take a lot of people that have been data architects and they come to me to be cloud architects and enterprise architects because they earn 2 to 3 times more. So most of my experience is getting people out of data architect careers. But, let's think about what you could do or use things if you're very interested in data. So the data itself is just stuff. It's what you can do with that data that actually is what matters. Now, if you don't understand the infrastructure, and you're not going to learn the infrastructure in AZ305, but if you don't actually learn the infrastructure, you'll never be able to architect anything. So what does that mean? That means you need to understand compute. It means you need to understand storage. It means you need to understand streaming data and streaming platforms like Apache Kafka, because 98% of organizations are multi-cloud. Now, for example, so there's that. The next thing that you would need to understand is the applications that could use. So basically speaking, you're going to need that infrastructure perspective. Now, here's where it's going to get big. Now, in the data world, you're going to have to become a master of data. And that is everything from collecting the data, ingesting the data, transforming the data, acting on the data, mining through the data to do something. So that means all kinds of platforms. It means good knowledge of different types of databases. It means knowledge on data normalization practices, mapping, reduction, when to use ETL tools versus ALT tools. Typically speaking, creation of that data, creation of data lakes, cataloging that data. So it's a good career. There's a lot of stuff to do. Now, I'd like you to think about, is this the right way to go to the data architect career? So I'm going to give you a little guidance if you like data architecture, and I'm going to give you a thought that you might want to think about how do I do some data architecture things, and how do I earn 3 times more and have a much better career? So when it comes down to it, in most cases, the stuff that people don't see usually is not the things that excite people, which could be good news. So for example, in networking, when I started networking, nobody knew what a router was. No one knew what a switch was. No one knew what BGP was. So I went into networking because it paid a lot because there was a critical need and they didn't have anybody. Now, when it comes to data, you could work on the data and set this up, or you could be a person that knows how to use the data to do something for the business. So the data architect's all about designing a data strategy. The generative AI architect is about the person that's looking with the organization's data, figuring out how to take that organization's data and figuring out how to make that business a lot more successful. So when you look at it, in one case, you kind of have the data infrastructure. In another case, you have the application of the data. So, Alon, I think you might want to consider a generative AI architecture career instead. You're going to be working with many of those same data things, but you're going to be probably able to have a much more meaningful impact to the business, which is going to translate to a much higher salary and much more career advancement. But, you know, if you love data, you love data. I'm not going to tell you not to do it. I'm just going to tell you where the weaknesses are in certain approaches versus the strength. But you're going to need to be more data oriented. But if you don't have the foundations, you're going to be stuck. And Alan, I can tell, you can always tell how by somebody that doesn't have the foundations versus someone that does. When you deal with someone that doesn't have the foundations, every day they're like, oh my God, this is so hard. There's this new thing. It's how do I keep up with it? Now, when you get your foundations and fundamentals really good, you realize that almost nothing has changed over the last 30 years. And I'm not joking. The speed of things has changed. The name of things have had to change, but it's like, the same thing, revision. By the time you're on the 25th version of the same thing, you're like, yeah, I got it the first 24 times. So get your infrastructure down, understand your network, your data center, your cloud. And then when you do that, you're going to be in good shape. Great question. And feel free to ask more. Jose, how can you develop the self-discipline to stay consistent and push through challenges, fatigue, or life obstacles rather than relying on motivation alone? Okay, so Jose, mental toughness or grit is one of the best predictors for career success. Now, there are ways that you can get through challenging situations. I'm going to give you lots of options that are there. Option one, and this is what I did, and this has changed my life forever. When I was younger, I kind of was a little lost. I knew somebody that was a drill sergeant from the Marine Corps that put me through Marine Corps physical training every day for 4 to 6 hours a day after school. And I did this every day, all day. And on Saturdays and Sundays, you know, we might have had a 80-pound rock and then marched for 30, 40 miles. It was miserable. It was painful. And I learned that I could do anything that I wanted. It helped me so much, Jose, that when I went to college, I actually went to school from approximately 7 to 3. I worked 3:30 to 11:30 at the firehouse. I worked 11 to 7:30. I got to school a half an hour late, and I did that every day. I had 2 jobs, full-time jobs, and went to school full-time. And then I used to work part-time shifts on the weekend. I got that from the mental toughness. Now, later, Jose, I actually was really lucky. I had done some mental toughness training. There was a retired Navy SEAL commander. His name was Mark Devine, and he ran mental toughness training camps. And I joined one of his programs. It was incredibly helpful. I did it from home, but he had a series of physical challenges and yoga challenges and other things that you can do that would teach you how to push through things in life. Around the same time that I took his training, I was unable to walk after having a massive martial arts injury. And it took about 7-8 hours a day of physical therapy for almost a decade to be able to walk again, sit in a chair and be normal after this martial arts industry. So I will tell you that benefited me. But the key is sometimes wake up and make your bed. That's honestly the first thing I would do first thing in the morning. And I know how crazy that sounds, but it gives you a sense of accomplishment. So what I do is I build my plan, I dive my plan, playing your dive, whatever. I used to do a lot of scuba diving in my youth, but I build a plan. But you also have to know what's in it for you, and you have to know what your motivation is. It has to be a real motivation. You know, if you're fighting for the survival of your family, you're going to put a lot of effort into it. If you're doing it because you want another badge on your resume, it's not going to be that interesting to do. So find something that really drives you. for me, when I started going into networking, and I did the CCIE within 9 months of the time, I decided networking was going to be a good idea. And Jose, I know you're from networking, so I know you know how hard that actually was. All I could think about is I could be talking to my relatives in Greece all day, every single day, that I'd be able to work at any company in the world and be able to not have to ever think or worry about money ever again. And therefore, I could send money to Greece to my family members that needed it. I could take care of my wife, my family, the rest of my family, that if they ever needed it. And to me, that was a big motivation because I, came from struggling. I didn't know where my next meal was going to be coming from or even where I was going to live growing up. So for me, that kind of motivation of safety and security and being able to provide for my family meant a lot to me. But find your why. Find what is in it you. Why do you really want it and why it's so bad? And every day remind it. Now, Jose, I will give you a lesson that I learned from Mark Devine from his Unbeatable Mind training program. He said, if you have to eat an elephant, you do it one bite at a time. Now, when you're doing something big, it's going to be hard. You're going to be tired. I mean, it could be a year sometimes if you're really trying to change your life and you're exhausted for a year because it's day in, day out, all day, every day. And at the end of the day, I made it through today. Cool. I can do tomorrow. And sometimes it's I can do one day, and sometimes it's I can do another 20 minutes. And, one thing that I will tell you that a lot of people use to develop mental toughness, I did as a martial artist, because you got to be able to get hit a lot and not quit, and it hurts, is really intense exercise can build a lot of mental toughness. So obviously, ask your physician if it's safe for exercise. Now, there are people that can do it on an Airdyne, those bikes where you roll and you just try to go longer than you can if it's safe for you to exercise. And again, I don't know if that's you. Yoga can be a great way to develop mental toughness. In fact, I was actually at a martial arts training camp many years ago with some very scary people, and they made us hold our arms over our head like this all day in a 110-degree room. And the goal here was for us to learn how to just hold our arms up, locked up, no matter how much it hurt. And I'll tell you what, there were two kinds of people in that room. There were the people that had the mental toughness training, and at some point after about 5-8 minutes like this, it's not comfortable. And we would joke around it. All right, yo, dude, can you hold this for 30 more seconds? Yeah. Okay, I challenge you to hold it for a minute. And we just made a game out of it. And at the end of the day, we were fine. The rest of the people literally dropped out inside of 10 minutes and 15 minutes. So make a joke about it. Make it fun. As the Navy SEALs say, embrace the suck. Sometimes just accept that it's not going to be a good day, that it's going to be a hard day, but you need to do it anyway. Kind of like the day where you wake up and you're tired, but assuming exercise is part of your routine and you go to the gym anyway because you didn't mean to, but you stayed up with your wife till 2 o'clock in the morning watching a movie that she wanted you to see with her, even if it wasn't your movie. And then after that, you took a phone call and now it's 5 o'clock in the morning and you're ready to go to the gym and you haven't slept, but you got to get there anyway. Find your why and fight for it like your life depended upon it. And then Jose, imagine where you'll be a year from now. Aladino, what is a good approach to approach recruiters on LinkedIn? So there's two things. If you create the right kind of content, they're just going to come to you and you will be fighting them off with a stick. So a lot of it's going to be creating the right kind of content. And then when they reach out to you, now it's finding the right recruiter. So here's what I mean by this. A good recruiter is worth their weight in gold, diamonds, and platinum because they will call you. They will find a time. They will book an appointment for you with the hiring manager. They'll tell the hiring manager why they should talk to you. They'll pre-sell you to the hiring manager, and you can be hired long before ever applying for a job. Now, here's the but. The big but is as follows. The big but of this approach is a lot of these people are not good, and some of them are good. So there used to be a fairy tale where a princess had to kiss a frog to turn into a prince. And the joke was, well, that princess is going to be kissing a lot of frogs until she finds the actual prince that's inside of that frog. Well, it's the same way with recruiters. So the recruiters that are good, Christina Marino from IT Excel, boy, she's a rock star. But there's some that are good that are going to be worth a lot. So typically I do it by creating content and they just run to me. Now, the next thing that people typically think of is as follows. And Pablo, you asked the question that's so dangerous. I want to make sure you stick around and we answer it because it's very important for you. But there's that. But you can also call recruiters. Call them, look for good, reliable phones, pick up the phone and talk to them. Now, I'm going to tell you, anybody that says, send me your resume and doesn't speak to you, throw them away. They are not a real recruiter. You need to speak to the recruiter. You need to interview the recruiter. You need to gauge their communication skills, gauge their sales skills, gauge the level of relationships they have inside of businesses, and then determine if you want to work with them. Because you can only work with maybe 2 or 3 potentially recruiters across the company. You can't work with like 30 at the same time. Because what'll happen is recruiter 1's going to pitch you a job and recruiter 2 is going to pitch you for the same job. And then both are going to drop you and be very angry. Aladino, it happens many years ago. A recruiter reached out to me and said, are you interested in a job? They didn't tell me who the company was. They gave me a lot of information. I said, yeah, I'd like to talk to them. And the next day, another recruiter reached out to me and said, Mike, I have a job that I think is great for you. And I said, sure, I'll talk to them. Guess what? It was the same company from 2 different recruiters. Now, the first recruiter called me and said, Mike, what the? And I said, you called, you asked me about a position. I was in the process of transitioning. And I said, yes. I said, out of nowhere, I get a call from some recruiter and they say, I've got a position. I think it sounds interesting for you. And I said, yeah, sure. I'll talk to them. I said, I didn't call anybody other than you. And they were like, okay. They're like, because, we don't want to be pitching you and having other people. No, I did. In this case, it was just genuinely innocent. But I know some people that'll just try to work with 30 recruiters, and that's not going to work either. So call them, feel them out, interview them. Are they sophisticated? How do they communicate? Do they look like they can sell? Do they look like they can lead? Hope that helps you. But don't just send a bunch of DMs. Pablo, for an engineering role, first, could you tell me what kind of engineering role you want? Instead of pursuing professional cloud certifications, what about something like a Red Hat sysadmin or a CCNA? You think the cloud certifications might not be a good investment? Pablo, first thing we need to do is figure out what you're interested in. But I'm going to tell you this right now. Don't get a bunch of associate certifications. When I see someone that gets an AWS Solutions Architect Associate, a Red Hat sysadmin certification, another associate, a CCNA, I look at them and say, I can't hire this person at all. And the reason is, if I see 2 or 3 associate certifications, especially in different people's careers, I know the person can't do the job. It's the same thing when I see a CompTIA A+, Net+, Linux+. I know that person has almost the fundamentals to start learning about it, but not the right fundamentals to actually do the job. So what I would say is find out the career. Now, let's say you wanted to be a cloud engineer. Yes, I would say an intro AWS Solutions Architect Professional, and it is a junior certification. And here's what I mean by a junior certification. A Cisco Certified Network Professional is multiple exams, and the reading for a Cisco Certified Network Professional, by the time you do the CCNA and CCNP, is approximately 5,000 pages. By comparison, if you do the AWS Solutions Architect Associate and Professional, you can summarize that into about 800 pages. So if we look at something like a CCNP, it's about 5 times more that you'd have to learn than any cloud professional certification. And that's why, Pablo, you're learning these cloud certifications don't mean that much, because they're not that much by comparison to the knowledge that you'd gain in others. The biggest problem with the cloud certifications is it's the name of a service and how to teach you to configure that service, but they don't tell people what it is. So literally speaking, and I've interviewed about 1,000 AWS certified people, and they didn't even know what cloud computing was. Because what happens is somebody learns about Elastic Compute Cloud, but they get taught that it's a virtual machine. And if they don't know that it's a virtual machine, they can't do even any kind of architecture. They don't know that when they're dealing with S3, it's the same object storage that every other cloud provider's used in every other data center for 30 years. They think it's new. So that's the weakness of these cloud certifications. They're just too basic, and they don't contain any knowledge of how the tech works or anything. It's just how to configure it, which architects don't do. And quite frankly, the engineers are going to be working with infrastructure as code. So Pablo, what actual career do you want? And then the best way to build your career is to figure out what you want to do. But please, as an engineer, don't get 6 little junior level technician systems administration certification, because none of them have anything to do with engineering. They all have to do with being a technician. And Pablo, I'll give you the difference. Let's say I was looking for a network engineer, and someone has the Red Hat sysadmin, and then they have a CCNA. And I'm going to ask them, could you describe to me how I would architect my network for high availability? What things do I need to look for? They're not going to have any idea. Now someone has the CCNA, and I'm going to ask them about the BGP finite state machine, and they won't know. Or they have the CCNA, and I'm going to say, how do I tune the performance of my OSPF domain? And they have the CCNA, and they still don't know. So I really, at that point, can't hire them as an engineer. I can hire them as a technician at best. So now someone has a technician level CCNA, a technician level Red Hat sysadmin, and I can't hire them for any job as an engineer. Now, by comparison, if someone had the CCNP or the CCIE, and they had one certification, not 30 or 40 associate certifications, chances are that person actually has the skill to do a job. So if someone tries to send me a resume that's got 6 or 7 associate certifications, I automatically know, don't interview the person. And I know because none of those equate to enough skills to do any single job. And if the person's spreading their skills across 6 different careers, they haven't mastered any career. Again, I still can't hire them. I still don't need them. So I recommend not getting a bunch of associate certifications. Getting 2 or 3 professional certifications in exactly the career you want. Because the associate certifications signal an employer that one day soon you might be ready for the job. And if you might be one day soon ready for 6 different jobs, you're still not ready for any job. So there's that. Cloud certifications can be a good investment, but understand they have nothing to do with, they're only going to be a small part of it. They have nothing to do with architecture. They have some things to do with engineering. Now, if I wanted a cloud engineer, for example, I might use the AWS Solutions Architect Professional for that cloud engineer. I might do the Red Hat Certified Engineer for that cloud engineer. And I might do the CCNA or a CCNP. Now that person has got some good networking knowledge, some good Linux knowledge, and some reasonable cloud knowledge. And that would be things that I could do. And then at that point, I would make sure that cloud engineer would know Python. They would know Bash shell scripting, which they would get out of that Red Hat system certified engineer. Anyway, they would understand Windows PowerShell scripting. I would get them involved in some Windows systems. I would get them involved in some infrastructure as code. So again, we're getting 2 or 3 certifications. They'd be good. Likewise, none of that has anything to do with cloud architecture. So for the cloud architect, I need to teach them network design, data center design, multi-cloud architecture design. I need to teach them the business applications, the leadership skills, the sales skills, the executive skills, the ability to design, present, sell architecture. So it's all about getting the skills that are right for the job. But don't just get a certification because you think it's good for you. It's not. I mean, imagine if you needed surgery and you walked in someone's room and they said junior level dog walker certification, junior level airplane pilot certification, junior level police explorer, junior level gardener. Are you getting your surgery from that doctor? Of course you're not. You're going to go to the doctor that focused their whole life on medical school. And when I see somebody with a bunch of associate certifications, I get terrified. To me, that's the person that's spreading all their efforts in every direction other than the one I need them to. So I hope that makes sense. If you've got some questions, please ask them. Otherwise, I'm going to have a nice, short, easy day and get back to work early, which doesn't hurt either. How should a security architect start their career? And they have to be trained. So you have to be trained. So you can't get a job as a solution architect without knowing. You can't get a job as a security architect without knowing. So 24 movie, let's talk about jobs that you can learn on your own versus jobs that require training. And I'm going to give everybody a secret here. The jobs that require someone to teach you how to do it pay far, far, far more. So I want you to think about a physician. Can a physician just do surgery on someone or prescribe a medication without going to school? No. And if they do, I promise you, someone will die. Can an airplane pilot fly a Boeing 777 with 300 people on it that's never been taught to fly? No, the plane's going to come crashing down till people die. Can someone defend themselves in court without going to law school, without knowing the laws? Of course not. So here's what would happen if we hired an architect that didn't know architecture. They would design a security strategy. The business would be hacked. the business could go bankrupt and that person would be fired. So again, the CISO and many people would potentially lose their jobs. We can't do this. So you're going to need to be taught architecture. Now, you're not going to learn it as a solution architect, because when you're a solution architect, here's the job. A solution architect is someone that works for a vendor that gets deeper into the solution, and they only sell a single vendor's product. So fine, now you're a solutions architect and you're now at Cisco. How do you design? How are you selling security architectures to your clients? How are you evaluating your clients' needs unless you've been trained? How do you, what are you looking at? What are you going to look at with regards to their application security if you don't know what to look for? What are you going to look for in their network security? What are you going to look for in their security policy? How are you going to design their demilitarized zones? How are you going to protect your data at rest and in moving? How are you going to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of these systems? What kind of identity strategy should you use? What kind of identity tools could you use? Do you need to use some kind of context-aware identity strategy? So, for example, if a person is not where they're supposed to be, they get reduced permissions until they authenticate a different level. How are you securing your network traffic that's moving along the way? How are you correlating all your logs? You have to be taught these things. And, any job that pays over $40,000 or $50,000 a year, you can't learn on the job. You have to be taught. Now, sure, you can go and figure out how to administer Linux yourself. You can buy a bare metal server, stick Linux on the server, figure out how to hack it, install it, patch it as a kernel. Fine. But that's not architecture. That's technician work. And you could teach yourself how to be an admin, like a cloud admin. You can teach yourself how to be a help desk person. You can do that. But I'd like you to think of the implications of that versus being properly trained. And if you can understand the implications of being properly trained, and you can actually understand the implications of your career over a long period of time, I want to give you some information. In fact, I'll show you. So how do you start your security architect career? You find a good training organization that can teach you. How did I learn how to practice medicine? I was taught. Now, 24 movie, I put my money where my mouth is. I have a $300,000 education, and I'm not joking about it. It cost me $40,000 to prepare for my CCIE. $40,000 when I started networking. And that was 25 years ago. So what did I do? I did the CCNA on my own. I took a 5-day, $5,000 Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer boot camp. I took a 10-day, $11,000 CCDP boot camp. I did the Cisco Certified Design Associate on my own. I then paid a few $1,000s. It was $4 or $5, I can't remember exactly, for the CCDP boot camp. And then I flew out to California to do another boot camp. But this boot camp was given to us free because I worked for a gold partner. I bought about 200 different books, and I rented a rack from CC Boot Camp to practice my labs, which was $400 a weekend, and I did that for 9 months straight. So, I did what it needed to. It was close to $40,000 for the CCIE exam. The exam itself was like $1,500, and then you had to fly to California to take the exam and get a hotel. So, that's what I did to get there. So what I would say is get a good training academy. Now, if you think about what happened, I did that CCIE early. And I'm going to say that I earned well over $150,000 within 12 months of starting my networking career, almost 30 years ago, 25 years ago. By comparison, I did work with some people that were self-taught. Now, I'll tell you, the self-taught networking people earned about $80,000 a year less than me. So think about that. 30 years, $80,000 a year more. That's an extra $2.4 million. But it's not just that. It's that, you can typically get a 5 to 7% raise annually through the life of your career if you keep working and keep working. And if you start at 150, you're a whole lot better than if you start at 50 as you go 5% up each year. And that's about a $15 million difference over your career. So I recommend you find a good security architecture academy. I'd like to believe we are, and we get people hired everywhere as security architects. But please, somehow learn security architecture. Or if not, here's your alternative if you don't want to be trained. Your alternative is to try and start at the bottom and get some kind of SOC analyst role at a very low salary. Do that for a couple of years. While you're there, start training, going to training and going to training and going to training. Maybe 2 years later, you move into another low-paid analyst role, but a higher level. A couple of years later, you move into an engineering role. You do that engineering role for a few years, and then you realize you want to be an architect, and guess what? You take in most cases architecture training because engineering isn't architecture anymore. It's a completely different career. So typically speaking, you're going to have to learn how to be taught this, but be happy because you can learn security architecture at a reasonable price. And the only other jobs that pay as much as a security architect, for the most part, are physicians, which means $500,000 of debt and 12 years in school. An attorney, which means another $500,000 of debt and 7 years in school. And you can do this as an architect and earn just as much, and you can learn it for a few $1,000s or less. So to me, that's about the best deal in technology careers. But you're going to have to learn it and be taught. So how can someone overcome imposter syndrome or lack of confidence when taking on a cloud architect role? So Cloud Doctor, if anybody has questions, great. Otherwise, we'll finish after Cloud Doctor, but I can stick around a little longer if you have questions. So please ask them if you do. So we have to define whether imposter syndrome is real, which usually is a real problem, or whether it's a clinical imposter syndrome. And here's the difference. If I take someone like a Russ White with 30 years experience in networking, one of the best network architects in the world, and he's afraid to go to a meeting, that's imposter syndrome. Where you've got someone that's good. So that would be like a Simone Biles not really believing that she's a good gymnast. Okay, that's imposter syndrome for real. And then there's what I call the human self-protection imposter syndrome. That's when you know you don't know it and you're nervous and you feel sick. The solution to that is training. And I can tell you the difference. So when I first got my first network engineering job, now I can tell you I was a CCNP, a CCDP, and an MCSC. So I had already had deeper certifications than everyone in that I worked with. And I had also spent a lot more time and invested a lot more. And when I took that role, even though it was my first job, I'm a manager. Cloud Doctor said, I'm hiring you as a senior engineer. You applied to be an engineer, but that's not good enough for you. When I was told I was a senior engineer and the last job I knew was practicing internal medicine, I was terrified. Now, Cloud Doctor, here's what I actually did. This is how bad my imposter syndrome was. I literally asked my wife, I said, dear, do you care if I get an extra credit card? And my wife's like, what are you spending money on now? And I said, I need to get a credit card because I'm going to spend, $3,000 to $5,000 taking everybody to lunch at MCI WorldCom because I want them to like me. So I have time to learn things before they figure out I don't know anything. That is the easiest, basically the easiest thing that we're talking about. So I had that. So what I did is I literally went into work. I bought every Cisco Press book that existed. And I then used the CCIE as my study plan to get over my imposter syndrome. And guess what? I read about 1,000 pages a day, Cloud Doctor. After about 6 weeks, my imposter syndrome was gone. Why was my imposter syndrome gone? Because I was good at the job. Now, fast forward a couple of years, all of a sudden, Mike, you're now the executive architect. You're the chief architect for the healthcare industry vertical. And I went, uh-oh. And I got told, Mike, build a business council of CIOs. And I'm like, huh? How do I even reach these CIOs, let alone build this business council? Well, that was about 25 years ago or 20 some years ago. And I went, uh-oh. And again, my imposter syndrome was back. So what did I do? I again went and took 4 or 5 different training programs. I paid for it myself. I didn't want to lose this multi-$100,000 a year job 20 some years ago. I was going to be good at it. I asked for some training from my company too. I practiced. I worked 8 hours. I practiced 8 hours each day. After about 2 months, my imposter syndrome was gone. So we have to determine if it's real. If it's because you don't know enough, you're not ready. And your body, your subconscious is telling you you're not ready. And you should listen. By comparison, if you know you're ready and you feel good. So generally speaking, imposter syndrome means the person needs to learn more. They're not ready yet. They're not good enough. And I'll tell you, I've had plenty of imposter syndrome when I first learned internal medicine. I didn't feel like I deserved to be there. So I had imposter syndrome for the first 6 months. After 6 months, I realized what I was doing. It's like, okay, I know what to do here. Yeah, I'm fine. The imposter syndrome's gone. But there are some people, like a Tiger Woods could be worried he's not a real golf player. That's real imposter syndrome when you've got a skilled expert And that's clinically what we're talking about. For 90% of the people, what they think is imposter syndrome is knowing they're not good enough and they need to be better trained before they get the job. They're feeling their own security. They know what they don't know. That's protection. For the rest of the people that are experts that have imposter syndrome, that is a condition that needs to be treated by psychologists and others that can work with it from a performance improvement perspective. But in most cases, it's just get better. But it's always worth checking with a physician, like to see. Tyrone, now bring in the next one. Which architect role do I see having the greatest earning potential? Network, security, or AI? Neither. The architect that's going to have the most earning potential is going to be the enterprise architect or the chief architect. And here's the reason what goes on. And granted, sure, you'll find lots of jobs that pay all kinds of salaries. But the closer you are to the business, the closer you are going to be with the higher salary. So I'll show you a couple things that are going to help you understand this. And then after this, I can tell you which ones and why. In the short term of the AI architect, but in the long term, it's going to be the enterprise architect. So Tyrone, I'm going to basically try to share some slides over here in a minute. Figure out, I know you know how to help me do this with our streaming platform. Tyrone, if you want to open this up. So I want you to really look at this supply and demand curve. And here's the key. So what'll happen is you'll at a given level of demand and a given quantity of people, there's always going to be an intersection of the supply and demand curve. So right now we have a lot of supply. And how can we tell there's a lot of supply? By the scope, the slope of what we're going to see. Oh, bear with me over here. So this means a huge quantity of people. This means a limited number of people with this quantity over here. So when it comes to engineers, like let's say a software developer, everybody knows how to code because for some crazy reason, somebody told everybody learn to code. So the point here is you've got such a mass surplus of software developers plus AI can code that you'll see you've got a software developer salary and it's going to be very, very low. Now, by comparison, now you're entering the architect world. So now instead of how to, you're now about designing solutions. You now have to understand how the pieces fit together. You now need to have a good knowledge of the network, the data center, and the cloud. And you're going to need this for anything, whether it's a cloud architect, whether it's an enterprise architect, whether it's an AI architect. So you're going to need all that. Now, any of these architecture careers, you're going to be here. You know, what we're seeing is when we train cloud architects, I'll tell you that on average, the people that I'm seeing that have never worked in tech before get their first tech job around 150, 160, 170. And I'm finding people that have been in tech for a period of time are getting offers of like 280 to 409 of the people we've trained. So, for example, there is that. So if you look at that, that's going to be your intersection. Now, over here, as we go up, now let's look at those other architect skills. And I'm going to show you why the enterprise architect will always pay the most. Now, how many people really know how to navigate a business with 200,000 people and work with the executives? Not a lot. Now, who's going to have the best leadership skills? Not a lot. Who's going to have the most business acumen? And still in technology in the same person? Almost nobody. Who's going to be able to go out there with the executive presence? And that's why you can go out there and see chief architect roles that pay $800,000 to $1 million or more. And that's an enterprise architect. And it's because they get further away from the business. So if we were to look at this, let's kind of go over the architect types just a little bit. If we look at the lowest grade of architect, that's still an architect, because a technical architect's an engineer, we're looking at that solutions architect. And at that solutions architect level, it's more about designing scalable tech. It's more about a lot of pre-sales meetings because solutions architects sell and they work for a company. It's looking at the current infrastructure, figuring out what you could do. It's figuring out how do we cut some bucks or dollars out of the thing, some basic disaster recovery planning. You know, you're going to lead a proof of concept test as a solution architect. You're not going to touch the technology. You're not an engineer. You're going to maintain some cloud documentation. So whether that's a security solutions architect or a networking solutions architect, it's that same job. Very tactical, half business, half tech. And that's why it's going to be the lowest paying. And then we can move into this cloud architect. It could be a network architect at this point. It could be an AI architect at this point. Some people would call it platform, but now we're talking something big. And let's look at why the cloud architect is a bigger, better skill. So now we're not just dealing with a single vendor stuff. There's nobody that's just using AWS or nobody that's just using Azure as a general rule. 98% of businesses are multi-cloud enterprises, and 89% of all businesses are multi-cloud. So that means all that silly business that you were taught in a certification like DynamoDB and Amazon Aurora and ECS and AWS WAF and all that, can't use it for the most part in your multi-cloud. So now when you're into this cloud architect role, and the same thing would be a security architect and the same thing would be network, now we're dealing with the big picture. So now we're going to be designing, across cloud platforms. Now we're going to be across platforms. We're going to be thinking more of strategic governance. We're going to be dealing with managing vendors. We could be dealing with 100, 200, 3 different vendors at the cloud architect level, the security architect level, the network architect level, platform architects, lots of vendors we're going to be dealing with. We're going to be migration planning, migration strategies, much higher availability systems we're working on, mitigating single points of failure, optimizing resiliencies, evaluating third-party providers, and trying to look to get some kind of business ROI at this point. We're now, in that professional world. And as we get up into that enterprise architect to the chief architect role, now think differently what the role is. Now we're creating technology roadmaps and we're aligning the organization's people and processes and technology like any other business architect or senior executive. Now we're going to be mitigating risks and looking for IT and other types of risks. We're going to be looking for areas of improvement in business processes and technology systems. We're going to be designing to make that business more agile and more flexible and things like that. We're going to be enforcing architecture standards and creating architecture review boards and creating architecture documentation repositories and working on best practices. We'll be looking at current and future states, developing governance structures. So you can see it becomes strategic. And while, this might be a security architect salary around that 183 to 292, when we start getting into these chief architect salaries, they become very high paying because of that lack of business skill in the world, the leadership skill and the executive skill. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Is an IAM architect worth it? I don't know what you mean by that. Is it worth having an IAM architect in your architecture? Maybe. Or are you saying, is it worth it to become an IAM architect as a career goal? So, normally speaking, if it's going to be a small security architecture, and I've never worked on a small security architecture, but if it was a small security architecture, the security architect could do it. But now let's think about the kind of real architectures that an enterprise architect would be dealing with or a big enterprise would need. So now all of a sudden I'm the chief architect, the enterprise architect, potentially even the cloud architect. Now I've got 3 clouds. And I have 800 enterprise applications, which is not uncommon. I have 5,000 remote locations. I have 200,000 IP addresses, 10,000 routes in the router. That's just normal stuff. 800 applications from 300 different vendors. Now I've got stuff to secure. Now at this point, I don't just need one security architect. I need some security architects focused on network security, other security architects focused on data security, other architects focused on encryption, other architects that are focused on SIEM systems and logging and event correlation, and other people. Now at this point, I need specialty people focused on IAM. Now, at this point, I've got people that are focusing on identity systems like Active Directory. They're focusing on federated identity management. They're focusing on all these types of authentication mechanisms that you could be using, all the biometric systems. So in this particular case, you're going to be the person that's really looking at all these systems. So is it going to be a career that's going to pay? Nowhere close to what you'd earn as a security architect, because people typically think of IAM as the sysadmin, the bottom of the barrel role. So it's going to be a very low paying role, whereas you're still going to just have to work as hard compared to other security roles. Now, are IAM architects worth it in your architecture? The answer is yes. But it's not as cool and exciting to say I'm the identity person as I am the security person. I'll also tell you that most organizations don't need IAM people. Now, I will also say that as we move more towards zero trust architectures, because we have less security options in the cloud than we do the data center, IAM people and zero trust people become more important. But, and I know people, I have a friend, Isaac, that is a great IAM architect, but this guy has real expertise on biometric systems. He'll know all the fingerprint systems, all the eye scanning systems, all the voice systems that are out there. He will know which ones will work, which ones have problems, what are the workarounds and the back doors to these systems. He'll get involved in deep identity federations, and it's a great job for him. So is it a bad job? No. Is it a good job? Yeah. Would you earn more studying security than IAM because IAM is a subset of security? Yes. But could you build a career in IAM? Yeah. So the bigger question is, do you love it? Is it going to make you happy? Are you going to be that person that's going to be looking at users and groups and subjects and tying all these systems together? And if you like that, it's great. But I think you'll have more career opportunity as a security architect. Much more. Typically higher salary, but it's a good role if it's something that you enjoy. Does someone need to become an engineer before becoming an architect? I'm going to ask you this question. Do you think before becoming a surgeon, you should become a lawyer? You think it's going to help you? So RCE GOAT, I'll tell you that I've trained people that were cloud engineers and I've trained people that were nurses. And it takes me no less time to train a nurse to become a cloud architect and get them hired than it does an engineer. Engineering and architecture have nothing to do with each other. Engineering is about making the tech work. Architecture is about improving the business. So there's this yes and no. Now, I will tell you, RCE GOAT, that when I have someone with an engineering background, if I can get them to forget they're an engineer and not think like an engineer, then they do very well as an architect. But I'm going to tell you, I found an equal number of people that were engineers that became architects and can't stop thinking like an engineer. And they're also the first to get fired because they're not architects. They want to be engineers and they're working as an engineer in the architect job. So I'll give you some examples. Arun was a student we trained, never was an engineer, got hired to tell us as a cloud architect when he was done with us. I can tell you that Ivan Tamba and Coyote were both hired by AWS. Their first tech job was a solutions architect, and they have been thriving, and I'm pretty sure both have been promoted. I can tell you that Richard F. got hired as an architect by MUFG Bank. He never had a tech job before. We trained him. And I can tell you that Lenny was our video editor before he got hired and went over to Citrix. I can tell you that Delroy Batt was hired by CDW, and his last job was working on ambulances before we met him. I can tell you that Daniel, who got hired by JP Morgan Chase, was working at a Nordstrom before we hired him. And I can tell you that Bellwinder was a stay-at-home mom, and Jermaine was selling landscaping gear before his first enterprise architect job. Or Jennifer E. was hired by JP Morgan Chase. Now, I'm also going to tell you that Jawad came to me. He was working as a cloud engineer for about 8 years. And after we spent about a year training him, we got him hired by AWS. Now, it took less time for Ivan Tamba, who never worked in tech, to be hired by AWS as a solution architect than it actually did Jawad, because Jawad had to forget about all the things that he knew in engineering and learn how to be an architect. I can also give you examples of Harsha. Harsha had been a cloud engineer for 10 years, and it took him a year and a half or so to become an architect. Harsha was one of the best cloud engineers I ever met. I mean, any company would have been lucky, but he needed to learn the presentations, the sales skills, the business skills, but he had his skills in another job. I can tell you that Wallace Agana, hired by JP Morgan Chase as an enterprise architect, first job, never had a tech background. Or Pierre D., who was hired by LeaseWeb, whose last job was a sailboat operator. Or Noah P., who worked at AHEAD as a solution architect who never worked in tech before. But I can give you people that are engineers that took just as much time to turn into architects. So being a lawyer prior to learning to become a doctor is about the equivalent of saying, yes, flying an airplane is going to make me a better cloud architect. It's not. Being an engineer is not going to make you a better architect because you just spent time in someone else's career. So at the end of the day, If I need back surgery and I have the opportunity of someone that's been a back surgeon their entire life, or someone that have spent half their life as a physical therapist and then the rest of their life as a back surgeon, I want the person that's been a back surgeon their entire life, not the person that spent 50% of their life as a physical therapist. And I love physical therapists. So I hire people that are experts at the job that I trained them for. I hire people that studied the job. I don't hire people because you used to do this other job and that's going to make you good at this job. No. I hire architects for architects, and I hire engineers for engineering purposes. Now, if I have an engineer and there's their background, there's still some good things about being an engineer. There's a lot of good things. The engineers really master some of the tech. So here's the secret if you are an engineer. Take the good stuff that you learned and change your mindset. Now you are in a very different position. Now, in this position where you change your mindset, you're focusing on the business impacts of what you do. You're not focusing on the tech. So big difference as you go up along the way. Take the tech, take any lessons if you've got that engineering background, and now focus on strategy because it's your new job. And actually, RCE Goat, you just put yourself in a dangerous position. You said your career goal is to be an IAM architect working on deploying identity. IAM architects don't deploy anything. IAM architects create a strategy that others will deploy. So the IAM architect is not going to touch any of these systems. We don't touch the technology. The IAM architect will design it, and most of the IAM work will be done by the security engineers and the systems administrators. Mostly the systems administrators do the IAM work. Okay, I can probably take one more if there is a last question coming in. If there is not a last question coming in, I will finalize. But while I wait, I want to tell you about 3 free opportunities we have. One opportunity is we are doing a completely free certified information security manager bootcamp. It's going to start soon, about 2 weeks from now, something like that. Chris actually has the exact dates. It's on the web list. It's completely free. So I invite you to join the certified information security manager bootcamp. Tomorrow, and I want to invite you for the How to Become a Cloud Architect webinar, and we'll go over everything you need to do to be hired, and at the same time. And there's also a document on how to get your first cloud architect job that I would like you to read. Tyrone, did any other questions come in? Baps, how can someone with no solutions experience get a job? The same way everybody gets their first job. So I want to make it clear. An airplane pilot's first day on the job is they're called pilot. A physician's first day at work, they're called doctor. An attorney's first day at work, they're called lawyer or esquire. So how do you get a job? You get the right training, you get the promotion strategy. And tomorrow we're going to talk about it. But any of you can do it. For example, Debbie G got hired by Credera. She had tried to train with like 30 different people. She came to us, and then all of a sudden we trained her in an architecture, and she immediately got an architecture job. For example, Vladimir was a 24-year-old college student who got his first cloud architect job after we trained him. Al was a sales rep for Kimberly-Clark, got hired as a senior solutions architect as his first job at Deloitte. So what is it that you have to do? Basically speaking, you have to get all the skills for the job because you have to be competent. You have to be really great. And you have to be able to do the job as if you had experience. Truthfully, nobody cares at the hiring manager level if you have experience. They care if you can do the job. I don't care about a job description. I've never seen an accurate job description in my life. But at the hiring manager, can you do the job? At the hiring manager, do they like you? Do they trust you? Do they want to work with you? Do they like your energy, enthusiasm, and passion? If they don't, they're not going to hire you, especially if you don't have good experience. Do you have the right skills? Will you go above and beyond? Are you emotionally intelligent? So the key here is you're going to have to get the skills. You're going to have to get the network skills, the data center skills, the cloud skills. And these are design skills. And the answer to that is yes. So then after that, you'll have to master these skills. Then you'll have to learn how to package your skills, how to create your brand, how to create the right content, how to reach out to the right recruiters, then honestly, you're going to have to learn how to master the interview, how to train for the interview, and everything we can do to get you to your goals. So that's it. But if you join the webinar tomorrow, I will tell you exactly what to do, and I will spend 45 minutes doing it, and it'll be live on Zoom, and I will answer your questions. We just don't have enough time to go through that 40-minute answer right now. Adam Stern, do I offer crash courses for people looking to interview for architect roles? So I offer two kinds of courses. I offer career training courses, and I offer interview mastery program courses. I can tell you there was a nice, sweet girl. Her name was Or. She just told me she just took our tech interview mastery program, and she just got hired by a big cloud provider. So I know that our interview training programs work because I've used it for 20 years with people, and it works well. But we have to determine what you need, Adam. And what I mean by Adam is maybe if you join us on the webinar tomorrow, I can see where you're at tech-wise. Because maybe you just need interview training. Sometimes it's that, or maybe you need a gap on certain things tech-wise or business-wise that you need to learn. And I'd love to make sure we give you the correct guidance, to make sure we give you some things. Sometimes I've got someone that's so good, I just need to polish them up for an interview, and they win that interview like nothing. Sometimes it's a little more than that. There's a gap in certain things that we need to fix. So we need to understand the why. But yes, we have lots of training for that. Tyrone, you can pop a link to the Tech Interview Mastery Program as well as our Cloud Architect Career Development Program, just so we can see it. Because I want to make sure we answer that. And then Tyrone, let's bring in the next one. Do AI architects learn the same cloud architect skills in your AI architect program? No. Our AI architects learn AI architecture. Our cloud architects learn cloud architecture. And our security architects learn security architecture kind of thing. So we train people for the job they want. Because if I trained you to be an airplane pilot, but your goal was to be a lawyer, you're not going to get hired. Now, I will tell you in our AI architect program, we do have a lot of cloud architecture fundamentals, and there is some cloud architecture training, but it is not the same training as a cloud architect. We have to make the training for what it would be. So, yeah, Curious Gringo, what an interesting name. I can tell you that I've worked in networking, and I can tell you that I have 23 years experience after my first principal architect job. So the principal architect job where most people hope to get to after 15 to 20 years was basically where I started within a year and a half into my career. So what I can tell you is, in being a principal network architect, I worked on core routing, right? That was my thing. BGP, OSPF, MPLS, traffic engineering, IP multicast. That was it. I knew other people at Cisco that spent 25 years on just wiring, other people that spent 25 years on just voice, other people that spent 25 years on various data center things, and other people that focused 25 years on security. All in networking, the networking side of that. And guess what? They could have spent their whole lives there. Now, I'll tell you, after interviewing people, what I found is most people don't have the competency for their job. How bad is this? If I interview 1,000 architects right off the street, most likely I can't hire any. And if I've got 10,000 applications, I probably still can't hire any. And that's how hard it is to hire an architect. Why is it? Because people learn the name of a service, how to configure it. They learn PyThops, they learn DevOps, they learn SysOps, they learn software development. And then someone says, our weighted average cost of capital is, should we build a new Nutanix environment or use AWS? What does our business thing tell you? And the person goes, huh? Or they talk about what is it to related. So the thing is, yes, Curious Gringo, there's a lot of cloud in our AI program, a lot of it. But our AI program taught by David Lithicum is designed to make you a great AI architect. And our cloud architect program is designed to make you a great cloud architect. Our AI architect program is designed to make you an awesome AI architect. And every architecture program we have is focused. But you will get many of the similar cloud architecture fundamentals. Because you can't be an AI architect if you don't know compute. You can't be an AI architect if you don't know storage. You can't be an AI architect if you don't understand security. So there is a lot of carryover, but there are differences. All good questions. I love these kind of questions. So to me, it was really nice spending the afternoon with you, getting to meet you, having a conversation, talking about careers. Join us tomorrow on that How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar. I really want to speak to you. And if you want any questions or things like that, we'll do anything we can to assist you along the way. So take care, everyone. And I will see you tomorrow. And don't forget to register for the free CISM training as well. Make sure Tyrone drops that for you one more time. Love doing these free boot camps. Take care, everyone.